So I think that lineage is really important, right? Like as we were just starting our conversation, like how do you put a name on the present, right? Or how do you, I think one of the jobs of theory is to try to provide us with descriptions or categories that we can think with, right? So does platform capitalism as a concept help us think that something different is happening from just commodity capitalism or just the moment of multinational capitalism or mercantile capitalism or finance capitalism, right? So I think the categories are really, really important. I also think their proliferation in the 21st century is a kind of sign that people are trying to figure out, like, what is actually happening in our economic base. Like, it's still capitalism, right? All of these are still capitalism. But when is a quantitative change in how capitalism works a qualitative one? When is a change in how we do business one that becomes a change in how we make art or a change in belief, right? When you're trying to put names on these almost historical periods, also, are they claims about transitions in time? Are they claims about just changes in ideology? And I think a lot of the ones that are in that list are people who are trying to make sense of, is the internet a new phase of capitalism? Is the digital a new kind of production? Are all the tools that are made available to us from email on to Google, on to ChatGPT, right? Are those tools actually enhancing productivity? And it's taken a while for people to sort of track and figure out that they're not really. So like that third industrial revolution is kind of like the promise that we're going to have this total transformation and expansion of capitalism in this way. Because we're going to be making all kinds of new things. And it turns out not to have really made a difference in the growth trajectories and profit trajectories in the G7s. So nonetheless, we do, I think, have a different cultural style as a result of these media technologies. And so that's kind of one of the distinctions I try to make in the chapter called Circulation, is sort of how do we think about we're still in this tendency of intensified circulation, intensified exchange that started with globalization. The compression of time and space is like David Harvey's name for some of those things, right? And now we just have, you want it, we get it, right? We have all kinds of instantaneity. So that's a sort of trajectory of intensification. So maybe it means things haven't changed so much in the base. It's not that we're in feudalism again, and we can talk about that more if you want to, right? But it's that we do nonetheless have this convergence of our styles of making art and making meaning, or in this case, of rejecting art and rejecting meaning, with that instantaneity, cut out the middleman kind of economic base. I think the feudalism hypotheses are so interesting. They really, really are, because they're trying to say, like, things are getting extremized, right? There's an incredible ballooning of wealth at the very, very top. And on the one hand, capitalism is always about that kind of opposition, right? Marx says in the Communist Manifesto, it's the simplification of class antagonisms, right? That you just have two classes, and they are, there are people who are rich and there are people who are miserable, and those are in structural relation to each other. But on the other hand, the kind of ballooning that we're seeing is really unprecedented and is related to specific legal changes in the tax code and specific, again, the stock buybacks thing, and kind of capital that doesn't have anywhere to go except to be reallocated to wealthy individuals instead of being invested in production. And the kind of precarity that we're seeing on the other side is really quite extreme also. How hard it is to just afford an apartment in the United States, right? There's almost no city in the United States where a person working 40 hours a week, minimum wage job, can afford an apartment. Like, those are extreme, terrible conditions, right? And there's a lot of that polarization that is happening by virtue of rent. Think about what streaming is even. We don't own the CD anymore, right? You don't have the thing at your house. If you stop paying your subscription, you won't have that music, right? And so that means that as a consumer, you're in a different kind of relationship to that corporation than you were in an era of less rent-based and more kind of commodity transaction-based stuff. I think trying to put names on that stuff is really, really important. And at what point are those differences really changing the power structure that we're in, or really changing the ideological structure that we're in. So I think it's really good to have that kind of debate about the, neo-feudalism hypothesis. It really is. But we are seeing lots of things that remain just tendencies of capitalism that Marx already described, but they keep extremizing.